And she's sitting there extolling the virtues of the British Empire. My parents were proud. Your parents should be ashamed. You've been colonised. I mean, it's classic Stockholm syndrome. You're proud of your coloniser. Catch yourself on. One, two. Microphone on, camera on. There we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Politics, Culture, and Some Other Shit. There's a podcast. It's been a while. I've been away. I've been busy. I'm not going to lie to you. I haven't got a fucking minute to myself. Poor me. I know. I'm serious though. I did at one point there, I'd done 35 days in a row working, no breaks, which is good and all. Glad of it. But I am a bird that likes to relax, you know what I mean? And I haven't been able to do that. And I haven't been able to do the things that are important to me. And that's, well, everything I do is important to me. I mean, music and everything, that's really important. But I mean the things that I like to do for leisure, which is exercise and learn Irish. And again, for about the 50 millionth time in my life, the Irish has just fallen away to fuck. And I'm not very happy with that. You know, I don't know. I shall endeavour. I shall just struggle on, see how I can make it work. But yeah. So, but anyway, never mind that. Let's get to it. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the Brexit cult that blew up Britain. Because we're still living with the consequences of all that shit. And we all shall continue to. Those of us that did vote for it and those of us that didn't, which is people like you and me, regardless, we're going to end up paying the price for this for the rest of our fucking lives. So we're going to get into it, and we're going to look at it in the sense that from the angle that we know long term, we know we can go back and we can talk about it, and we know where it's brought us to today, but there are some grisly consequences, direct grisly consequences. We're going to talk about the boy that threw the petrol bombs. They weren't petrol bombs, improvised explosive devices, let's call them that, at the migrant centre in Dover, and then fucking killed himself. Absolutely insane. So, I didn't load that video, so I'll have to do that, yeah. So, very sad, very, very sad. But we'll get to it all. So let's, before we get to all of that, just pull the theme down there. There we go. Before we get to all that, got some gigs coming up. There we go. The Bonnevilles playing the Atlantic Sessions on the 20th of November. And apparently that's all. Oh, there we go. The Bonnevilles and special guests, which are the Exhalers and Aqua Tofana, playing Voodoo on the 12th of 22nd of December. Okay, these haven't loaded in, so let me just add. I'll just get rid of all that shit. Hold on. One sec. Just to get it up on the screen there for the people watching the podcast on YouTube, which isn't an insignificant number of people. Kind of good. Yeah, there's that. And yeah, so there's those, and I'm also playing a solo gig. I'm going to show you about that now. So there's the gig. So we're actually playing. The Bonnevilles are playing Portrush. Atlantic Bar. Sorry, I'm trying to do two things at once here. So forgive me just while I just get everything caught up to speed. There we go. So that's too big a massive head for Irelandy. So Let's not do that. Oh my God, would you just go away? There we go. That's better. So, right. Sorry. Didn't have that teed up at all properly, so bear with me. So, the Bonneville's are playing Voodoo in Belfast the 22nd of December. We're also, before that, we're playing the Atlantic Bar in Portrush on the 20th of November, Sunday. It's a free gig, 10 p.m. doors. We're on stage, 10:30, no support, bada bing, in and out. It's going to be a lot of fun. That's a part of the Atlantic sessions, and there's no cover. So it's a free gig, which is awesome. But during the day, I'm going to be doing a solo gig with me. It's going to be introduced by Ralph McLean, the BBC's Ralph McLean, and I'm going to be playing. We're going to be doing In the Round with Roe, Kieran Lavery, and myself, which is amazing. 12 o'clock, Portrush Town Hall. That one's £10 cover charge. It'll be very well attended. So if you're thinking about going to that, you should get those tickets pretty soon. And then I was delighted to be able to announce this wee beauty just yesterday. I'm playing the Sunflower Bar in Belfast on the 29th of January. And I'm going to do a solo gig, and for the first time, it's with a full band. So let me tell you about that. It's very exciting. Let's grab my coffee. First of all, it's a 2 p.m. kickoff. So 2 p.m. doors, will be on stage straight away. I think I'll probably get a support act. I haven't decided yet. I have a couple of people I would like to ask. You'd be able to go there, have a few pints, do what I do, what I'm doing with my lad. Me and Jeannie and Richie and Lisa and the girls and everything. We're all going to go to the gig, have a lot of fun, and then we're going to head round to Madden's for the session. You should come and join us. Come, hang out. It's £15 in. There's only like 50 seats, and it's half sold already. It's half sold out, so it will sell out, no doubt. So if you're thinking about going to that, please jump on to the bonnevilles.co.uk, go to our shop there, and you'll see, click the link and you'll be brought to the ticket link, and buy yourself a ticket. Now, let me tell you about the gig, what I'm doing. It's a show called On Madre Rua, which means Red Dog, the Red Dog. And I'm putting together, it's probably going to be the name of my new album, or it might be the name of my new band. I don't know yet. So I'm still working on it. So playing with me is going to be Laura Cure, my cousin, on fiddle. Joseph Toman, Janie's, my wife's cousin, he's going to be playing piano. Summer, my daughter, is going to be playing bass. My other daughter, Lily's going to be doing backing vocals. And then Jared Skelly is going to be doing percussion. Jared is a well-known percussionist, or well-known drummer around, plays in lots of bands, but notably my mate Phil Woolsey from Papaluna. Remember I spoke to him a few months ago on the podcast. So he was a drummer for them, and I only met him recently because they were the support band for our gig in the Woodville Arms on Saturday night. Talk about that in a second. So I asked Jared, would he do that? And he said absolutely he would. So he's going to be there providing some percussion, not drums, not full drum kit, just a bit of percussion, shakers and groovy things, right? Which sort of ties the room together. So there's that. Yeah, so it's going to be very exciting. I've built up a nice collection of songs, and I can't wait to play them for you. So please come to that. Go and buy a ticket. Go to the bonnevilles.co.uk. You get a link to all those tickets on the bonnevilles.co.uk. So that's good. So, what was the other thing? Oh yes, so we played our Halloween ball on Saturday night in Lurgan, our first annual Black Cat Club Halloween ball, and it was fucking fantastic. It was absolutely brilliant. I should have threw some pictures up. I never even thought. We had so much fun. It was just brilliant. Yous all turned out, everybody that went, yous all turned out. You were fucking class. If you weren't wearing fancy dress, you looked odd. Put it that way. It was just brilliant. We had our Halloween ball. Sean Haggerty, the stand-up, compared the evening, and did the whole, and he was genuinely fucking hilarious. He was really, really good. Everyone said so, and the reason everyone said so is because it's true. And it was fantastic, and with such good fun. Yeah, it was a big relief to get it out of the way, really, because we've been doing it. The Black Cat Club have been working at this for over 2 years, and COVID obviously stymied the whole thing, and we lost our original venue, etc., etc., etc. It was a big old pain in the arse, but we got there. So we've already released next year's tickets. So if you want to get your ticket bought, now bear in mind, there's only 200 tickets. At the capacity for the room is 200. It's a huge room. You could get more in it, but there's a lot of inbuilt seating and things like that. It's a big wedding venue. So the cap is 200. So we've put the tickets on sale already, and we offered them to the people that bought them already first. It went to the first one. We've already offered those to them, and a lot of those guys have gone online and bought those for next year. So the venue's booked. It's going to be the Bonnevilles plus a support plus a comedian, and we'll probably do a whole lot more. Then we'll figure it all out and get better at it. So if you want to, go to Eventbrite and search for the Woodville or the Bonnevilles or the Black Cat Club, and it'll come up for you, and you can get those bought. Now they're £15. They were £10 for last year. We put them up to 15 because we just about got over the line, money wise. And everything, as you know, everything's gone up in price in the past couple of years. So, with £15 for that night out is not a lot of money. I can assure you, it was amazing. You'd have paid twice that, and still thought you were getting value for money. But anyway, so there we go. Loads of gigs happening, loads of stuff. Bonnevilles are new tours, writing new songs, thinking about going into the studio, doing all that very groovy and cool stuff. So, to the podcast, let's do this. The Brexit cult that blew up Britain. Let's just get that open for you. There it is. And make no mistake, these people are a cult. Some people would say, don't you just hate that whenever you get something all organised, get it all loaded in, and then you go to do it in real time for you guys, and it doesn't work? It was working a minute ago. I just did it. Don't close. Shut that down. Sorry. Oh my God. Where are we? Sorry, stay with me. The other thing as well is I had to change my software, which is no good. You hate that. So I used to use software called OBS for all this, and then I changed my computer recently as well. So I went from PC to a Mac. Don't know why, just thought it was recommended, and I did it, and I was glad I did it. It was very good. Window cap, sorry, I'm just looking for the right thing. So there it is. Boom. There we go. Yep. So I changed all my software, changed all my shit over, and you know whenever you do this, there's a learning curve, right? And it's supposed to be exactly the same, but it's not exactly the same. I had to change from OBS because OBS was glitching. Things weren't working right. I don't know why. I tried to research it. There was no answers. So the easiest thing to do was to try another piece of software, which I did, and it worked. So that's why I've moved to Streamlabs from OBS. So it means I have to go through this shit. But so until I get on top of it all, you're going to have to bear with me. I hope you don't mind. So let's get to this. The Brexit cult that blew up Britain. This is from an article. I'm going to read you an article from Politico. Then I'm going to play some video of the real world consequences. Now, we know the real world consequences. We know what it is. We're all living with Brexit, especially us here in the north of Ireland. The Northern Ireland Protocol, etc., etc. Recently, loyalists have said that they called off some terrorist attack. I personally doubt that. I think loyalists are a bunch of fucking idiots. I don't think they've got it in them to drive down to Dublin and plan an attack on a politician as they claimed. So I just really don't think so. So we're living with the consequences of it all, but there are others who are living with real, more real-time consequences. Ours is kind of slow motion, but we'll get to that. So here we go. Here's the article. The Brexit cult that blew up Britain. For a small band of libertarians, Liz Truss's resignation is the final act in an 11-year project to remake Britain. London. It was a revolution 11 years in the making, but for a small band of right-wing libertarians, Liz Truss's appointment as UK Prime Minister on September the 6th seemed the triumphant endpoint to an epic and improbable march that led them from the fringes of British politics to Whitehall's grandest corridors of power. In the course of just over a decade, a group of little-known politicians, fringe think tanks and outspoken media figures had helped drag the Tory party and the nation it led from David Cameron's vision of so-called compassionate conservatism to a Brexit-backing, free market-embracing, low-tax juggernaut. It took them 4 Tory Prime Ministers, 4 general elections and an era-defining referendum to do it, but with Liz Truss in charge, they were finally living their dream. The country was to be remade in their image. It lasted 44 chaotic days and no more. They felt their moment had come at last, said Tim Beale, Professor of Politics at Queen Mary University in London. This would prove that Brexit hadn't been a ghastly mistake, but a fantastic opportunity. But of course, as it was always based on fantasy, it was always bound to collide with reality. Truss was elected Conservative leader and so UK Prime Minister. Last month, on the votes of 81,000 party members, a group large enough to defeat her more centrist opponent Rishi Sunak, but small enough to fit comfortably inside Wembley Stadium. Now, just a point there. The 81,000 party members, just highlight that, a group large enough to defeat her more centrist opponent, Rishi Sunak. The implication being that Rishi Sunak is a centrist. Do you get what I mean? You know, it's technically correct. He's more to the centre on paper than Liz Truss, but he's far from a centrist. He's a right-wing psycho, in my opinion. Well, it's not about opinion. It fucking is. Back to the article. This band of true believers had been wooed by her heady performances of a low-tax regulation state that would embrace the opportunities provided by Brexit. But as soon as Liz Truss started to put her promises into action, and we remember that, it was literally a car crash. It was a fucking... via a mini budget on September the 23rd, which included tens of billions of pounds in unfunded tax cuts, alongside a massive energy subsidy scheme, the markets began sliding into turmoil. Within days, it was clear Truss had triggered an economic crisis, and one that sent the Conservative poll ratings tumbling along with the value of the pound. She killed the Queen. She collapsed the economy. What was it your man says? She killed the Queen, she collapsed the economy, and she did more damage than Brexit, and all, and she did it all in 3 days. Absolutely massive achievement when you think of it. I couldn't have done better myself. Her MPs facing electoral oblivion were terrified. In the weeks that followed, Truss was forced to sack her Chancellor, Kwasi Kwarteng, U-turn on the most of their economic programme in a desperate bid to stabilise the markets. This week, her Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, more on her in a minute, followed Kwarteng out of the door. Her MPs became mutinous, some publicly demanding her head, and support rapidly drained away. On Thursday morning, after a disastrous attempt, so this article is a few weeks old. On Thursday morning, after a disastrous attempt to force her MPs to vote against their own manifesto pledge to not start refracking projects around the UK, she accepted the game was up. So, I'm pretty distraught about it, says Mark Littlewood, Director General for the Institute of Economic Affairs, one of the right-wing Westminster think tanks that inspired the Truss agenda. Remember, we were talking about a few podcasts back with George Monbiot about the shadowy right-wing think tanks that they're funded by dark money. Nobody knows who they are, what they are about, or whatever. But we know that they seem to have carte blanche and free range on the mainstream media, on the BBC especially. They are right-wing, and without a doubt, you can see from the formation of these right-wing think tanks and their dripping into the creation of the narrative. You hear me say all the time, be careful about language. Listen to the language. Where do these words come from? Like, the big one that would have happened, the big things that would have happened in our lifetimes would have been things like the Iraq War. And you get this, the word, things like the triangle of terror and weapons of mass destruction. And you know, all these things come from somewhere. The President, George W. Bush at the time, didn't just make that up. Somebody created those words. And it creates a new narrative that goes out into the public discourse. And then you start to hear yourself sometimes saying these things. And that's what these think tanks do. It's exactly that. They go out into the mainstream media and they create new narratives. And you and I then start repeating them. And listen to people whenever you're talking, especially when you're disagreeing with someone about immigration or Brexit or financial issues, left-right issues, whatever it is. Listen to the words that I was listening to a guy the other day, and he said one. It was it was on another podcast, and I think he actually phoned in to say it, and he said something along the lines of, socialism has failed everywhere it's ever been tried. And he started to list all the countries where socialism has failed, Venezuela, Cuba, Soviet Union, all that sort of stuff. One of the things that they never mention is China for a start. But that talking point, and that's what it is, they're called talking points, that was given to him, that was drip-fed to him over decades, now to the point he thinks he invented it. You think that you're the first person to come out with that. You think that you invented that phrase. You come up with that idea on your own. You didn't. It was given to you. It was presented to you over the course of decades and many, many hundreds of hours and many miles of newspaper column inches, getting you to say that out loud. Socialism has failed everywhere it's worked. Socialism has never been tried because the behemoth that is the capitalist machine, the empire of capitalism, anywhere socialism raises its head, it gets its fucking teeth kicked in. Sanctions from the US, just look at that. That on its own. People are starving in Venezuela. They're not starving because they can't grow food. And this is another part of the whole racist othering of people. About the belief of empire, that you're special, you're unique. The white man's burden, all this stuff, that these people aren't capable of growing food for themselves. Don't be fucking stupid. Of course they are. But they're just uniquely dumb enough to believe in socialism, which means that they can't grow food. Nothing to do with that the embargoes that are put in place stops them from getting the machinery and the access to chemicals and the access to industry in order to do that on a mass scale. So that's what I mean to say. So I've no straight off the point there a little bit, but that's what these institutes. So back to the Institute of Economic Affairs, the IEA. That's what these things are, and that's what they're for, to go out and muddy up the public discourse. And they're very, very, very good at it. So back to the article. It actually did appear as if we had a new government in very broad terms that shared the IEA analysis of the problems with our economy and it not being market oriented enough. I'd even say that out loud without getting a fucking migraine. But Truss botched the political execution rather than the economic thinking, Littlewood insisted, lamenting that if the execution goes badly wrong, it had a rebound effect on the ideas. Indeed, conservative libertarians explain the Truss debacle in various ways. She was not clear enough about what she was doing and the reasons for it. She made the announcements in the wrong sequence. She refused to match her tax cuts with spending restraint. She failed to produce independent proof that her plans would work. There's certainly little sign of remorse. These people are true believers. They do believe that libertarian conservatism is the way forward. The position we're now in is that these reforms basically have not been tried, Littlewood insisted. Her attempts to implement the change were too hurried, too rushed and not thought through, naive in some regard. Former UKIP leader Nigel Farage was another right-wing libertarian who'd been advocating for low-tax, small-state ideals for decades. I think the hope was that the Kwarteng budget was going to mark a very significant moment, Farage says. Now that appears to be dead, and I would have thought dead for a very, very long time. The people in the Conservative Party that I talk to who think on my wavelength have pretty much given up. But Tories opposed to the libertarian agenda are delighted at its failure. It's not that the disastrous fallout for country and party alike. The mild flirtation with the Tea Party libertarianism has been strangled at birth, and I think for the general good fortune of the Tory party, that has to be seen as a good thing, said Simon Hoare, who's a Tory backbencher. One serving cabinet minister added, the libertarians are going to have to adjust to reality like the rest of us. They can't buck the market. Nicky Morgan, a former cabinet minister who previously co-chaired the centrist One Nation caucus of the Tory MPs, said her party must now return to its former broad church approach. The task for the One Nation wing of the party is to almost ignore the libertarian right and get on with reasserting One Nation politics. Prove to everyone from Truss downward that if we want to stay in power, then being sane and sensible in the middle ground is a much stronger place to be. That's what Keir Starmer's obviously going for these days too, isn't he? So, let me just see here. Right. For some on the Conservative right, the so-called Trussonomics was the inevitable end point to a march toward deregulation that began with the Brexit movement in the early 2010s. Farage was one of a number of Brexiteer thinkers who wanted the UK to leave the EU in a bid to drive up business competitiveness. I don't get. I'm genuine. I've said this right from the beginning. If you want to leave the EU, by all means, leave the EU. There's no magic formula to being in the EU. If you think you can do it better, then a nation is entitled to make that decision and probably should make that decision. The problem with Brexit is that it was a complete lack of planning, which betrayed the lack of thinking that's behind the brains behind the EU or the Brexit project. There was no planning. There was no preparing, which shows you what they were planning for with the government. No planning. When they say more market friendly, market oriented, what they mean is no regulation. Again, back to the IEA and the use of language. This is what they call market oriented. That's code. These words don't come into existence on their own. These things are code. They're coded language. for deregulation. Deregulation in order to do what? So that you can... What does Marx warn us about? One of the many warnings that he gives us from the past about capitalist, the nature of capitalism. Capitalism has a nature to monopolise itself. That's where the phrase capitalism will eat itself comes from. Till you'll have 100 corporations and they'll all buy each other up until you've got one. Now, you put in place regulation, that doesn't happen. You say you antitrust, it's called antitrust regulation. Basically, anti-monopoly regulation. We've all played the game. You know what happens. One person ends up owning everything. By the way, that's what monopoly was. It was a warning from a socialist, created that game. And then it was stolen off her. And then she was sort of forced into selling the rights. But... So whenever they say market orientation, that's what they mean. They mean deregulation. Deregulation for what? So that they can lower standards. The EU standards were very high, globally speaking, not high enough, but globally speaking, they were very high. So that means that they don't have to put as much effort into putting the product on the shelf, which puts more profit in their pockets. Deregulation. In the end of 2023, 2,400, Britain is set to lose 2,400 roughly EU regulations. Bonfire of the regulations, we've heard this phrase. Now, in order for the UK to maintain a trading relationship with the EU, the standards that the EU maintain are going to have to be at least minimally maintained in the UK. If you want to sell to your next door neighbour, which is what you do in a normal society. You buy and sell and trade, buy and sell of the people nearest you. That's why trade deals with Australia and trade deals with fucking Argentina and Brazil were nonsense. It's not that we can't do it. It's that it doesn't make any sense when you've got the biggest single market sitting next door to you and we are allowed access to it. We just have to maintain certain standards and make certain guarantees, Northern Ireland Protocol being one of them. So they want to deregulate. So when they say market-oriented, that's what they mean. These are code words, hand grenades dropped into the public discourse. And then you get your fucking gammon da turns around and goes, that sounds like a good idea to me. And that's how you end up with Brexit. Drip, drip, drip. Over 20 fucking 30 years. Dripping this in to the public well. Poisoning it all the way. So, back to the article. So Beale said the libertarian strain of the Conservative Party had, in fact, been present for decades, but that Brexit cause emboldened it and brought it to the fore. The turning point came in 2011 when a number of right-wing Conservative MPs, many of them newly elected the previous year, rebelled against David Cameron and voted in support of a referendum on EU membership. This was the first time they had realised their strength. Across the country, anti-EU sentiment was rising, fuelled by the Eurozone crisis, soaring levels of immigration. Going to talk about immigration next. This is getting to this, right? The immigration that goes into the UK is a drop in the bucket compared to the other countries in the EU. There was the push me, pull you going on. Farage says, the stronger UKIP got, the more emboldened the Tory Brexiteers got. True that. 2011 was the moment when UKIP suddenly started coming second in by-elections. This group in the Tory party and this group outside the Tory party, namely my group, this is Nigel Farage talking, always had very similar policy goals. Cameron was spooked. The pressure from within and without forced him to agree a referendum on Britain's EU membership, and it was won by a Leave supporting side 2016. Going to get Brexit done It was 2016. 6 fucking years ago. Still not done. Cheered on by a highly vocal section of the right-wing UK press, which also supports low taxes and deregulation, market orientation. All the same thing. All code words for the same thing. Poison the well. Look at the current state of the water treatment plants in England and Wales. We've seen the pictures of the raw sewage being spilled out onto the beaches. Beautiful beaches in Cornwall, down there in Devon, outside Bristol. Insane. Beautiful white sand beaches and just a sea of human shit sailing out into it. Deregulation, market orientation. The referendum allowed them to coalesce around a single issue, said David Yelland, former editor of Rupert Murdoch-owned Brexit-backing Sun newspaper, who now speaks out against the influence of right-wing media. Pity you hadn't fucking done that 6 years ago, you fucking prick. The right of the Conservative Party and their supporters in the media and the think tank world knew they had one go at this. They had to win Brexit. Otherwise, they were finished. And they did. And since then, it has emboldened them. So this is what we're getting to. It all started with Brexit. And us here in the North, we're talking about our referendum on the border poll. It all started, well, it started years ago, obviously, but Brexit put it on fucking steroids. That was it. We're off to the races. And I keep hearing people saying, oh, it won't happen for... Do not make that mistake. Please, we need to be prepared. We need to get our fucking ducks in a row here. We could end up being fucking a bombshell dropped on us that we have a border poll this time next year. We need an all-Ireland health service. We need the housing crisis sorted out. And I'm just going to say it, we need Sinn Féin in power down south. They need to do the things that they promised to do in their manifesto. Sort out the housing crisis and sort out the NHS. The NHS and All Ireland NHS. And if they do that, I think we can win a Brexit poll or a border poll. But it's going to take a few years for that to happen. So if we get dumped on now, if I was a unionist, I would be pushing for a border poll now, today, immediately, sooner the better. And again, this is a part of the lack of strategy that always stuns me about unionism. There is no strategy. I don't understand. Everything from Brexit to fucking sucking up to the Tory party to rejecting the Northern Ireland Protocol, rejecting Theresa May's deal, and now not pushing for a border poll sooner rather than later. It doesn't make any sense. There's no strategy there. So, that last sentence of that last bit, and since then that has emboldened them. Right, that's where we're up to in this article, which is today. We're up to today. With Cameron forced from office, the group's next battle was with his successor, Theresa May, the Eurosceptic Remainer, who tried to negotiate a less drastic form of Brexit, which would have left Britain tied to many of Brussels' rules and regulations. Farage says the loose relationship between pro-Brexit libertarians inside and out of the Tory party maintained its hold over the new party leader, ultimately blocking her proposed Brexit deal in Parliament and forcing her resignation, a la courtesy of the DUP. Boris Johnson then emerged as the next Prime Minister, a genuine vote leave campaigner who was able to push through the hard-nosed form of Brexit. The core Brexiteers were not ultra-libertarians, explained former MP Stuart Jackson, who lost his job as a ministerial bag carrier to vote with the pro-Brexit rebels in 2011. Sorry, just going to push this on. Here we go. There were a few that wanted London to become Singapore-on-Thames, but the bulk of Brexiteer MPs, and definitely Brexiteer voters, were much more what I would call communitarian. But Jackson said the vacuum of ideas about how to respond to Brexit, even among the Brexiteers, left space for all the libertarians to fill. And there in one sentence is your fucking problem. Let's go. The vacuum of ideas and best how to respond to Brexit. As if Brexit was an action, and then you had to react. Action, reaction. Action, reaction. You created it without putting in place, without filling in the gaps that left the space for the libertarians to fill in. There was no consultancy document. There was no nothing. There was no, what does Brexit mean? What is it? I said, we'll sort it all out later. Here we are later, and still not sorted out. And the British economy is in a fucking bin. That's a great sentence, actually. The vacuum of ideas and best how to respond to Brexit. He's still deluding himself, as if this was an act of God. This was a natural occurrence that there was no avoiding. There was no way around it. They were the only game in town in terms of a new intellectual concept that the UK could consolidate on being outside of the European Union. That is a very, very generous description of the Brexiteers, the libertarian Brexiteers, and that they had an intellectual concept. Right, we'll get to the end of this. As Truss and Kwarteng look back at the ashes of their brief Downing Street careers, the pro-Brexit right is licking its wounds and wondering where it goes next. Shankar Singham, another libertarian thinker who's close to Truss and the IEA, insisted it was too soon to tell whether the low-tax, ultra-competitive agenda is too damaged by Trussonomics' experiment to resurface in the near future. It's a very febrile atmosphere, and things have to settle down. There's a big arc of history here, and Liz Truss's mini budget does not suddenly transform the arc of history. Littlewood insists there would be another chance to implement libertarian policies in less than a decade, given the structural economic problems that Britain faces. Had this mini budget gone as smoothly as I had imagined in my dreams, rather than as badly as it had gone in my living nightmare, I think we could have got quite a lot of this done now, he said. Unfortunately, a large amount of it is off the table now, but I think it will have to be returned to. Brexiteers of a different persuasion, of which there are many, are hoping for an urgent change of direction, however. The vision of Brexit as Davos on Thames, what a fucking nightmare. Only ever held by 10% of the Conservative electorate is dead, wrote Matthew Goodwin, an academic who has charted the rise of the populist right. The only way forward for the Conservative Party now is to get back to what Brexit was really about for the 90% and to reconnect with their 2019 electorate. But Beale of the Queen Mary University believes the libertarian strain among Conservatives will forever lurk beneath the surface, insisting their radical solutions to the nation's ills have not been properly tried. When the spaceship doesn't arrive, he said, the cultists simply say we got the date wrong and it will be coming in 2 years. And that's exactly what it is. They're a cult. The Brexit cult that destroyed Britain. And as I keep saying, leaving a trading arrangement, a trading partnership, which is what the European Union is. It's an economic trading relationship. Leaving it is the right of everybody that's in it. Which is fine. What's unforgivable is not planning for it. There was no plan. And then, as the guy said in the article, you leave the space to fill, and it's filled by the libertarians whose ideas are basically do nothing. Leave everything open to the market. Just let rip. Bonfire of regulations, no environmental regulations. Just put whatever you want in your food. And that's the end of that. So there we go. There's that article. Explains nicely, I thought. But it's a bit more serious than that for some, I'm afraid, rather than just being some lunatic fringe. 10% of the Tory party that believe in libertarianism. I like libertarianism to a point. The idea that, well, let me say this. When I was younger, I kind of thought there was a bit of a libertarian streak in me. Because I'm a bit of I'm a bit sort of, I do like left alone. But once you figure out how society works, that we're all communal and all this sort of stuff, you realise it's a little bit childish, but I still have that in me. I still have that I want to be on my own type of a thing. And sometimes I have to kick against it. Spoke about a concept called socialist libertarianism, and then I was laughed at. People told me I was full of shit. So, now when I talk about people who are getting it a bit tighter, I'm talking about these guys. Check this out. So I'm going to play you a little bit of video from Tisky Sart. Now, you may know this story, I'm sure you do. A migrant centre was attacked in Dover. And we're talking about immigration and things, all connected to Brexit. We know that immigration was a huge part of the Brexit lie. So this poor, deluded man, who, we'll get to it anyway, but he's a terrorist. How he's not a terrorist, I don't know. But maybe there's some definition of terrorism that he doesn't neatly fall into. But nonetheless, have a listen to this.
On Sunday, a man drove 100 miles to an immigration detention facility in Dover. He then threw 3 petrol bombs at its gates before killing himself in his car. 2 people who had been inside the centre suffered minor injuries in the attack. This image, taken by a photographer on the scene, shows the attacker throwing the second petrol bomb device from his car. As you can see, it looks like a petrol canister with a firework taped to it, so not particularly high-tech, dangerous nonetheless. A wider angle shows the fire from the first device as the second one is thrown. Perhaps surprisingly, the police are not treating this as a terrorist incident, and this is how the Daily Mail reported the attack. Onlookers heard several explosions as all hell broke loose and said the suspect, who has not been named, was laughing as he threw the devices. 2 people inside the centre suffered minor injuries. A motive for the attack remains unclear. Now, given the suspect drove 100 miles to throw an incendiary device specifically at a centre known for processing migrants, I'm not sure it should be difficult to decipher a motive here. But there we are. The attack follows widespread negative coverage of migrants crossing the Channel, but it doesn't seem to have tempered headline writers in Britain. This was the Telegraph's front page the morning after the attack. Migrants side by side in hotels with public. So this is the scare story. You might have to stay in a hotel next to a migrant the day after that attack. And by the morning interview rounds, the attack had become a mere footnote to the so-called migrant crisis. Julia Hartley-Brewer is here interviewing Natalie Elphicke, the Conservative MP for Dover.
We are in extraordinary times. I mean, so many developments when it comes to this story over the weekend, not just hitting that 40,000. We know those official figures will show later today. But the horrific petrol bomb attack on the Manston Migrant Processing Centre, which did injure some, very, very frightening. The man then later went and committed suicide in his car. The pressure on hotels, tens of thousands of these largely young men being put up in hotels. The Daily Telegraph reporting that migrants are going to be side by side with the public in hotels instead of whole hotels being bought up. Millions, even billions over the year being spent on this. Why do you think the government hasn't got to grips with this?
Well, I mean, the small boats crisis is clearly out of control and an entirely fresh approach is now needed. What's been happening is simply not working. And I think that's for 2 reasons. Firstly, because every single attempt to get on top of this crossing is delayed or thwarted by a rag bag of people who seem to want open borders and don't seem to want us to get a grip on this particular situation.
Are you talking about the human rights lawyers, the various charities helping these people?
Exactly. We've seen people just object to absolutely everything, object to the new laws coming through, object to any agreements put in place, object to all of the efforts of the government to try and tackle this issue. And that's really not on, because it puts people's lives at risk crossing the channel, and it also results in this absolutely uncontrolled amount of people arriving that we've now seen, as you say, 40,000 people this year alone.
So we should note, Julia Hartley-Brewer in her question did call the attack horrific, and Elphicke tweeted on Sunday that she was deeply shocked by the incident. But Elphicke didn't even mention the attack in her answer and went straight on to deliver anti-migrant talking points, which, by the way, completely went unchallenged. But that was the right-wing Murdoch-owned Talk TV. Let's see if the BBC did any better.
We're talking about here, although we're talking about Manston, these are people who have crossed the channel in small boats, and we're almost reaching the point where there are 40,000 people so far this year who have crossed the channel. An attack on Western Jetfoil facility in Dover yesterday, where asylum seekers are being processed after being rescued from small boats, has again raised concerns in the region. 3 petrol bombs were thrown by a man who then killed himself. The incident followed reports that asylum seekers had entered people's homes when they came ashore looking for help. Simon Jones has been speaking to residents.
Well, it's just a joke, isn't it? It's just a joke. I mean, they say they could stop it quite easily if they wanted to, but I don't think they want to. It's just a case of...
Right. I've been listening to this language all my life, as I'm sure you have as well. This othering of migrants. Now, there probably isn't an easy solution to this problem. But here's an idea. I've said this my entire life. If you don't want people coming here from other parts of the world, stop destabilising other parts of the world. People aren't coming here from Italy and Germany and the USA and Japan and all the stable countries in the world. They're coming here from all the countries that your government just happens to be dropping bombs on, just happens to be enforcing embargoes on, just happens to be stealing their natural mineral wealth on, just happen to be the countries that the British Empire turned into dust for 200-300 years. They just happen to be those countries. And now this is a part of the whiplash of the crimes of empire. Now, check this out. This is Suella Braverman, who is the current Home Secretary, who you remember was sacked, or resigned, I should say, when she was Liz Truss's Home Secretary. And then 6 days later, she was reappointed by Rishi Sunak. Check out what she has to say about the British Empire. And this is particularly disgusting because she is a woman of colour. She addresses that point, actually. Check it out.
Can I ask you a personal question? Your parents are from Mauritius and Kenya. How do you feel about stopping other people arriving here?
I have no qualms about that, absolutely. And again, this is a kind of a common argument trotted out by the left that, you know, because of the colour of my skin and my heritage, I have to think a certain way and I can't declare certain truths on migration.
You annoy them, don't you? Because you're not left-wing.
I hope I annoy them. That would be my delight if I'm annoying the left. But no, I disagree with that. My parents came here through safe and legal routes. My mother was recruited by the NHS. My dad came here because he was effectively kicked out of Kenya in the 1960s. But they came here legitimately. That was the policy of the government. They came here, they integrated, they loved this country from afar as children of empire. They don't, by the way, have any qualms about extolling the virtues of the British Empire. It was the British Empire that brought infrastructure, the legal system, the civil service, the military to countries like Mauritius and Kenya.
Yeah,
and my parents
they fucking did,
on my mum's side there, I think it's her great uncle and auntie fought with the Allies in World War II, and they were so proud of that. So I think, you know, children of empire, there are definitely, there's obviously
What a fucking sickening display. A sickening display. She's proud of the empire. The British brought the legal system. The British brought they built this, they built the railroads. Because you wouldn't have done it. Your people wouldn't have done it. That's what they say here in Ireland. They used to say it, they don't say it anymore. They wouldn't dare. Oh, the British did. As if we wouldn't have built our own buildings and built our own roads and built our own trains, railway networks, infrastructure. As if we didn't have a superior legal system under Brehon law. That God knows what that could have evolved into. The legal system in Ireland made the British legal system look like fucking two cavemen fighting over a rock. Compared to the complexity and the level of detail that was available to the average Celt 1,000 years ago. And she's sitting there extolling the virtues of the British Empire. My parents were proud. Your parents should be ashamed. You've been colonised. I mean, it's classic Stockholm syndrome. You're proud of your coloniser. Catch yourself on. And the empire, no empire ever went anywhere to bring justice, as they claim, to improve the lot of the native people, as they claim. No empire did that ever in the history of any empire, in any galaxy, in any fucking universe that has ever existed. The empire goes to your place to steal your shit. The empire didn't raid Ireland, cut down every fucking tree in it, and build massive ships to sail round to India to make things better for Indians. They did it to steal the 40 trillion pounds worth of wealth that it has been estimated that the British Empire stole from India. India was rich. Ireland was rich. Kenya was rich. Every country in Africa was rich. They had natural resources that the British stole. And then she's sitting there coming out with that. It gets worse. Check this out.
Why can't you stop the small boats coming?
It's a deeply entrenched and complex problem. That's a simple answer. And I would love to be here saying, well, claiming victory. I would love to be having a front page of the Telegraph with a plane taking off to Rwanda. That's my dream. That's my dream. It's
when
my
will
obsession.
that happen? Why
Jesus
can't you stop?
fucking... Did you ever hear anything as bad in your entire life? I would love to be dreaming to send a plane full of migrants to Rwanda. It's absolutely fucking disgusting. The disgusting, sickening people. And the upshot of it all is... Sorry, I shouldn't put the theme on there. The upshot of it all is this poor man. And I do say poor man because he's been propagandised his entire life. And this is the point of today's podcast. The language that we absorb that comes from these think tanks. I just tidy that up on the screen there, just so that I can make it a little bit bigger for you. Do that, and then I can do this. There we go. That looks better, doesn't it? You can read it. The language that we absorb that comes from these think tanks that invent these little phrases and little sentences and little catch-alls. It's just neatly put a bow around a thing. They call them migrants. They don't tell you where they're migrating from and why they're migrating from. Now, on that, it's every country's right, as I said earlier on, to leave the European Union that's in it. It's every country's right to do that. It's every country's right to protect its own borders if they so choose to. I love the idea of an open border of a global city. It kind of excites me, but I don't think it's not a realistic prospect. And you do have to control your borders. Of course you do. Every country has to. So, wanting to control your own borders it's not necessarily a thing that should make you think that you're some sort of a right wing, that everybody that thinks of it is some sort of a right wing ghoul. Who doesn't want to control their own country? I love my country. I want it to be a good country. I don't want it to be flooded with people that we can't provide for no reason at all. It's got nothing to do with us. I understand. I understand the concerns of people on the right. It has to be said. It's always people on the right that are expressing the concerns, but they do it in such a fucking ugly way that you can't ally with them. You can't go, well, listen, we get your point. How do we fix this? But whenever you look at the problem from the bottom up, what you see is the normal people, as always, are the ones that are left picking up the pieces and having to deal with the fallout of the actions of the corporations and the governments across the world. In Ireland at the minute, there's a big problem with Ukrainian refugees coming to Ireland. Not the problem with them coming, they can't be accommodated. There aren't enough hotel rooms, there aren't enough houses. There's a housing crisis in Ireland at the minute, and the Irish government opened their borders to Ukrainian refugees. Now these people need help. I agree with that bit. Who doesn't? Of course they should come here. But where are we going to put them? And that's the bit. So the average person is having to deal with the consequences of the inactions of your government and of the global corporations that have started this fucking shitty war in Ukraine and Russia, with Ukraine and Russia, and it is a proxy war. I've told you my thoughts about that before, and we'll talk about them again, no doubt. So wanting to protect your own borders is not ugly. It makes sense. Of course you want to. But what if you haven't got this? It's not that we haven't got the space in Ireland. We haven't got the infrastructure. So what do? Just keep bringing them in, which is what's happening. Then that gives rise to who? The right. The right are now running around the Irish independence movement, or whatever the fuck they're called, some horrible right-wing group. We've never had massive right-wing groups in Ireland before like that. Political right-wing groups that can align with the worst of the British nationalists. Politically are aligned with these people. You give them fuel. I follow a group on, is it Instagram? The Irish, I can't remember what they're called, the Irish Independent Movement or Party or something. And they're basically right-wing reactionaries that would be in alignment with British nationalists. And they were photographing some guy is obviously a brown fella, and a wee gang of them standing outside a bar or whatever it was. A young girl was walking across the road. She was dressed to go out for a nightclub. You know, Irish girls, they all like very short dresses and all the rest of it, and look great and fair play to them. And he sort of grabbed her and held on to her and all the rest of it. And then that's portrayed as being, do you want more of this? Look at what these people, the othering of those people. Do you know what I mean? And all you're doing is giving fuel to that sentiment. And whenever your dad or my dad sees that, he thinks it's a disgrace, and he goes, of course they're fucking... And then that's it. They're off and running. They're away to the fucking races. And only because there isn't the infrastructure and there isn't the planning to help people integrate into your society. Now, those people don't want them coming at all. I do. I think they're class. I love it. But I want them to be able to integrate. I want them to be able to live fulfilling lives, social mobility, be able to do well, provide for their families, get married, settle, give us what they've got. Now, the other problem with immigration, and this is us as Irish people know all about this, is that we're now dealing with immigrants. We've always been emigrants out. We've always been going out. What happens whenever you hollow out a country of its youth, of its energy, of its ideas? People coming from Syria. Syria needs those people. And they haven't got them because we've got them. And we're going to do well because of it. But what about Syria? What about Ireland? 70% of youth in Ireland are now saying that they're thinking about leaving, which to me is a national crisis. It's not being dealt with at all by the government. It's not. Apparently, it's okay. They're okay with that. So 70% of our youth are thinking of leaving because they can't get anywhere to live, but we're taking in refugees and immigrants from all over the world. How does that make any fucking sense? Now, don't get me wrong. That's a right-wing talking point I've just threw out there. That's what the right-wing are saying. They follow it up with don't take them at all. I'm not saying that. I'm saying we need better infrastructure to be able to provide what these people need, and for our own people as well. First and foremost, obviously. We're good people. We're a good country. We're very kind. We're generous. We're very charitable. I think the reason that we're very charitable as a people is because we've relied on the charity of others for many years, for centuries in fact. Whilst other countries have been condemning us with abominable cruelty. So back to this. This is what happened. This is my fucking point. Whenever you end up... Now, you watched that article there about that man that threw those petrol bombs at that immigration centre. And then said, and he committed suicide. Do you know how he committed suicide? He tied a rope around his neck, tied the other end of it to a lamppost, got into his car and drove off at full speed. He decapitated himself. Well, I don't know that he did, but I mean, he must have. There's no way he's in one piece after that. Now, that man was clearly out of his mind. So here's an article or a Twitter thread from Rajan Basra explaining a few bits about radicalisation. And this is what I've been getting to. This is what I'm trying to talk to you about understanding. Whenever we don't provide the proper infrastructure, and how do we provide for the proper infrastructure? Through our tax base. We use our taxes to build infrastructure. On October the 30th, a man threw petrol bombs at an immigration centre in Dover, injuring 2, and minutes later he killed himself. Sounds very American, that, doesn't it? 3 days on, the attack has been largely forgotten. But it's worth taking a closer look at what he posted online and what it says about radicalisation. Now, let's see this. The earliest posts online are from a Twitter account with just 4 tweets. His first message was, "I love the world." A day later, "It's time to intern all radical Muslims." That's quite the one too. The remaining tweets are about jihadists and grooming gangs. Now, language... Where does all this language come from? Where do these ideas that poison this man's brain come from? Talk about jihadists. Don't talk about how we got jihadists. Just talk about jihadists. Talk about grooming gangs. Which is something that's been permeating the right-wing media, all media, for a decade now. He was following 59 accounts. 58 were mainstream. The type Twitter suggests you follow when you sign up. The remaining account he followed was the BNP, the British National Party. So it seems he held far-right views from at least 2014. He next popped up on Twitter in November 2015 after the ISIS attacks in Paris that month. He posted, "We are an island and we have been attacked before. It's time to close the borders and sink all these boats. Let's sort out the strong from the weak." His response was ironically exactly what ISIS wanted: to further polarise European societies, provoke a backlash and force Muslims to decide us or them. ISIS wanted to destroy, in their words, the grey zone and reduce the world to black and white choices. Not all of his tweets were extremist, and on he was still following mainstream accounts, but no BNP this time. Fired off a few tweets over 7 days and then stopped using the account. Then there's the radio silence until he pops up on YouTube. At first, some innocuous videos, him drinking in the street, an unintelligible rant, and complaints about internet speed. So far, nothing. Videos virtually watched by no one. I know how he feels. In 2018, a video suggests he was delusional. I will bring knife crime down by 50% in 2 years, but it gives an insight into his life. I'm 63 years old. I've been in prison. I know about violence, about being disadvantaged, abused and neglected. I know all that. Then a step change. 2019, after the Parliament voted to reject a no-deal Brexit, a video titled Treason by Facebook Zuckerman. The typos are his. Facebook has committed treason on the British people. They have blocked Facebook and Instagram because of this vote. Here we see signs of his conspiratorial thinking. Facebook and Instagram and WhatsApp were actually down on the 13th of March for technical reasons, but Andy Leake, which by the way, that was his name, Andy Leake, the outrage was deliberate interference into the UK by outsiders. You were brought to the tower, my friend, he says. Throughout this time, the grooming gangs issue was still on his mind. Made a Pinterest post about it. Pakistani grooming gangs. I don't have coverage of what he posted, etc., etc. But then there's this. In April, he posted a video on YouTube titled, I'm broken. I buried my 41-year-old son yesterday and I'm devastated. After that, I'm dying and no one will believe me. I've been dying for the last 2 years. I'm fucked. Then after that, a bizarre video. If you want to be on the next biggest dating site, contact me. £100 will get you a long way. In the context of him just saying he's buried his son, that was a real change of pace. He also posted about his difficulties on Twitter. I know about that myself. He said he had stage 3 cancer. His son Jamie had recently died of suicide and his mother was beaten by drunken men most of her life. At the same time, he was posting anti-immigrant, anti-refugee and xenophobic tweets. So on, so on. He styled himself as a defender of free speech, protector of women. And all of, so we'll get to what separates Andy Leake from everyone else that makes threats online but never acts on them. He had held these views for years, so why now? These questions are tough to answer, but when you pull all of this together, you can see a complex mix of racism, xenophobia, conspiratorial thinking, and what appear to be mental health issues. I wouldn't be surprised if there was drug and alcohol misuse too. In Andy Leake's case, it culminated last weekend. On Saturday, he drove to a migrant centre in Dover and was seen looking at the buildings, driving past them multiple times. This was a possible reconnaissance, or was he backing out at last minute? He returned the next morning, driving 110 miles from his home. Eyewitnesses describe him laughing and shouting as he threw a handful of improvised petrol bombs at a migrant centre. His final tweet, as reported by Hope Not Hate, who've done a good job highlighting the accounts he was following, he will obliterate the Muslim children. They are now our target. And there are disgusting women who will be targeted, mothers and sisters, is burn alive. His tweets and the grammar and spelling isn't great. The next day, the Home Secretary said the British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our south coast. And so far, the police haven't decided if it meets the threshold for terrorism. Instead, saying it was likely to be driven by some form of hateful grievance. As a thought experiment, let's imagine if the perpetrator had been brown, that he had made negative comments online about the government and threw petrol bombs at an army recruitment centre before killing himself. Would there be any delay in classifying it as terrorism? So, anyway, There we go. So that's the world, that poor deluded individual, and I do feel sorry for him. I do. I mean, I think he quite clearly had a lot of issues in his life, and when you're susceptible to language such as we hear from the IEA, and we all are, and we all need to be careful. We need to understand the power of language and what it can do to us. For that poor man, it clearly drove him insane. As well, it contributed, let me say, and we don't sort of. The reason that I'm going to finish with that, I'm starting with that article, the cult that broke Britain, the Brexit cult, and finishing with that poor man doing a terrible crime and then ending his life in a, quite frankly, horrific fashion. It's going to get worse. These things are going to continue. Immigration into Britain hasn't decreased since Brexit. It's increased. Don't tell you that in the news. If we want to stop immigrants coming here, stop funding foreign wars, encouraging foreign wars. President Zelensky was negotiating with Vladimir Putin in March. Boris Johnson was hustled out there to tell him to stop. That's now confirmed. That happened. This could have ended in March. The USA is occupying 1/3 of Syria. It just happens to be the third of Syria that contains the oil. We've destabilised the Middle East, Iran, Iraq, etc. We know what we've did in Iraq. 20-year war for a crime that they didn't commit. A million Iraqis dead. Country turned into dust and its population scattered to the four corners of the earth. All carried out by and funded by, supported by and encouraged by Britain and the consecutive British governments. Then we complain that there's migrants come here. Would you not be a migrant? Would you not try and get out of that place to try and go somewhere else? Do you see the hypocrisy? And then you end up with someone like that choosing to take a course of action like that. These things are all connected, my friends, and we need to be very careful. Whenever we hear think tank, we need to know what that means. That's another think tank. That's another candy-covered little bundle of joy that we need to know what that means. That means someone is paying these gubs to go on TV, training them, paying them to come out with these ideas. These ideas always inevitably end up pointing towards market deregulation, market orienting your economy, etc., etc. All this shit. That's just the modern ones. We've gone through this all our lives. Just think back. The triangle of terror, the war on terrorism, you're with us or against us, all this stuff. It's not as neat as all of that. There's a reason that these people are coming here. There's a reason that Kwasi Kwarteng put his budget in place, and there's a reason Suella Braverman is going on TV and saying these horrible, fucking horrible things. That, by the way, 40 years ago, she would have been Enoch Powell if she'd have said that. Now it's just a thing that happened. Hardly even mentioned. Enoch Powell didn't say anything worse than that. And he's now one of the biggest villains in British political history, rightly so. Was it worse than what she said? No. So there we go. That's me done, everybody. Thanks for listening. This has gone long. I'm sorry about my lack of podcasts. I've just been so fucking busy. Don't forget, I'll throw that up on the screen actually first, will I? I've got this gig happening real soon. Get on there, get those tickets bought. It's halfway sold already. They've only been on for a day, so if you want them, you should get them. Follow me on Twitter, Instagram, and if you want to lend me your support for as little as £1 a month, you can do that over at Patreon. Thanks everybody, take care, good night, and I think I might get to see you again for a live stream tomorrow, but we'll see. It just depends how busy I am. Toodles.